It is a Dynasty price check time. It's that time of the Dynasty season where we got to check in on some of these vets and kind of see where their price is at after the 2024 season. Are talking about two quarterbacks today, and the first one is Brock Purdy, and he's a kind of an interesting one. Don't think he's really fallen too much, actually. I think this is kind of where he was heading into the season, maybe a little bit higher. But he's key trade cuts, QB 14. You see the stats there. That's points per game, by the way, 18.6, 19.2, 18.6. So he's been top 12 since he took over as the starter for San Francisco. And so he's been a low-end QB1. That's kind of where he's ranked. So, Brian, we're talking about Brock Purdy here. And just double-checking, he fell a little bit. He was more like QB. He got to like QB 11 during the season, but he entered the season right around QB 14. So what are you doing with Brock Purdy? Obviously, we're approaching this from, kind of in a vacuum. Obviously, it's always different if you're competing or rebuilding and stuff like that, but kind of just in a vacuum, how you feeling about Brock Purdy? Is he a buy? Is he a sell? Or is he just a hold at this point?
Yeah, I think he's a pretty solid hold. Where he's ranked, it's pretty appropriate. Like obviously there's some question marks about him, like his future. Basically, we're gonna have to wait to see if San Francisco's gonna pay him. Yeah, the question is, like, is it Brock Purdy or is it the team itself? And you kind of have to make that choice.
Which way do you lean there?
I don't know, actually. Like, I think he's played really, really well. I don't know if he's worth, the $50 million a year contract.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if you're going to get much better. I mean, he literally took him to a Super Bowl last year. Obviously, like, he's on an extremely talented team, and they have some money management issues. They got a lot of expensive guys on their roster, so you kind of have to like make your own decision here. Like, do you sell thinking you're gonna get out a year early, and try and get him at, like, I don't really see his value going up in the future, given a lot of the guys that are ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but I mean, he's still young, still playing really well. In general, the Niners obviously had like a down year, but can't really scoff at the stats. Basically, about 250 yards a game and 1.5 touchdowns. Obviously it was a little better in 2023, but that's within the variance, I think.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you. I don't really see his value going up too much. I guess the only way I think it goes up slightly is if like other guys just kind of fall, and he just kind of moves up ahead of them. Not because of what he's doing, but just other guys falling. But yeah, I mean, I feel like 2023 was like best case scenario for Brock Purdy. Like the touchdown percentage, his first two seasons, obviously his first season was like 5 games starting, but 7% touchdown percentage is pretty insane. That led the NFL. He led the NFL in like yards per attempt, air yards, yards per completion, quarterback rating, QBR, all that stuff. And he wasn't that different this year. I mean, he threw for 10 less yards per game. His completion percentage was a little bit lower, but wasn't drastic. His interception rate was about the same. It was just the touchdowns, going from 7% to 4.5%. A lot of that is just the offense wasn't as good. And I would lean a little bit more product of the system. And I am very curious as to what they do with Brock Purdy. There's just been things here and there which like lend me to believe they're not going to pay him $50 million a year, and they're going to and Kyle Shanahan's going to trust in his system and say, hey, I can bring in whomever, and they're going to do well. They're going to give me Brock Purdy type of production, and hopefully, maybe he finds his quarterback. So I just lean that way, just kind of how they were treating him during preseason, how he was, Shanahan was reacting to Purdy and some of his throws and stuff. So I guess the one thing that was that's in his favor, he did rush more this year. His in 2023, his first full year as a starter, 9 yards per game rushing. This year is 21 and a half. So if he does that and he gets a little bit closer to, the 25 plus touchdowns, he's obviously going to be a little bit better. He'll get into the top 10 quarterbacks for sure. So I guess my philosophy here, and it's going to kind of come into play when we talk about the next guy, is just like, I don't see a whole lot of difference between Purdy and Goff and Lawrence and Tua and Dak. And so, like, I'll generally tier down to one of those guys if someone thinks of Purdy as more valuable than them, and kind of pick up extra pieces. Like, I'll always be happy to do that. But he's a QB2. That's what he is to me. He's a QB2, valuable piece. But let's just say 49ers don't re-sign him. Do you think, like, that's really going to hurt his value a lot? Like, just before we even see him without the 49ers, like, do you think people are going to drop him 3, 4, 5 spots in the rankings, assuming that happens? Or do you think they're going to kind of wait and see?
You're saying, like, in preseason, like, if they don't pay him?
Yeah, and they basically say, like, yeah, we don't want to, we're going to move on from Purdy. Or, let's just say he has another season like this with San Francisco, and then they don't end up paying him or anything, and he becomes like a free agent. Does just like that affect his value right there? Like, just because he's not going to be on the 49ers, like, significantly?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think if he has another season like this, then he'll go somewhere and start, and sure, depending on where that is, like, it will definitely affect his value. I was just looking at Jimmy Garoppolo's numbers when he was with San Francisco, the couple of seasons that he actually basically started the whole year, and pretty similar numbers, honestly, except for the rushing. So maybe it is more the system than the player necessarily.
Yeah,
being compared to
Jimmy
Garoppolo is not what you want.
Yeah. No, I really do think it's more of the system. We kind of saw, like, I don't think he's an elevator. Like, he's going to kind of go as the team goes. They had injuries, Ayuk, CMC, and Debo wasn't playing quite like at the level that Debo's playing. And, like, Purdy just kind of, was, like, average in terms of just passing. So slightly above average. So, Bryce Young, we're talking about next, who to me is kind of in this giant bucket of quarterbacks. And I keep mentioning it in a lot of videos where it comes up, or it's just like, to me, there's a pretty big oversaturation in the market of quarterbacks. We added 6 of them this last draft. All of those guys, I think, are in the top 20. So, like, that's going to cause a little bit of oversaturation. But Bryce Young, I mean, we saw huge improvements from Bryce Young from the point, that he was benched until the end of the season, both for real life quarterbacking and for fantasy, in my opinion. So he came back in week 8 from his bench. He obviously started off the year terribly. People are saying we're never going to see him play for the Panthers again. Kind of shows you, like, sometimes we just need to be freaking patient. We got to teach ourselves this, even though we're never going to, we're always going to fall for it. But from week 8 on, Bryce Young was the QB. Nope, it's not showing me. Hang on. He was the QB 12 in total points, the QB 18 in points per game. So, Bryce Young, how are we feeling about him? I mean, Carolina's already kind of committed to him as the guy. So, are you feeling pretty confident in, like, you're telling people to buy low on Bryce Young? Are you feeling pretty good if you did that now? Do you think you kind of have yourself a QB2 here, or how are you approaching him?
Yeah, I think, like, him yeah, you're definitely happy if you bought low on him. Obviously, like he played a lot better. I still didn't really see anything where it's like, oh, like hell yeah, like this is the dude, you know. But I think it like if you bought low on him like while he was benched or even after he came back for a game or two, like his numbers still aren't like eye popping necessarily. Um, he's still only throwing for about 200 yards a game. I guess that actually includes his first two games, but I'm kind of taking out. I'm just looking at it as like a 12 game sample size because he had those two that he barely played. So, basically a little more like barely more than one touchdown a game kind of a thing. Not a whole lot on the ground rushing, like not difference making numbers, but very similar to Purdy. But obviously, like the yardage differences and the touchdown upside are on Purdy's side, given like the makeup of the team in general. And I think Bryce Young is going to be in a similar situation this year as Purdy, where they're going to really have to like play extremely well in order to kind of to play their way into a contract. I don't know. I just not really sure like what the future holds for these guys. And so, but I kind of view them very similarly. In terms of like what their value is moving forward for different reasons. Like I think Purdy's the more valuable because we've seen it, but Bryce is a bit just a couple years younger, but he's on a way worse system. But he definitely helped his value over the back end, whereas Purdy basically kind of stayed the same. So I wouldn't be surprised. Go ahead.
No. Finish that.
Oh, I was going to say I wouldn't be surprised if these guys flipped in value, basically, like over the course of this next season, where Bryce Young moves up to where Purdy is and Purdy falls to where Young is, because they're kind of part of that same blob. I think Purdy right now is on the higher end of it, and Bryce is kind of somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So since getting benched, or from getting benched and coming back from the benching week 8 on, he averaged 210 passing yards, touchdown and a half per game. If you look at from their bye week, so week after their bye week, they had a bye week in week 11. Week 12 was like his numbers were really, really good then. I think it was not really good, but it was like 225 passing yards per game and then a touchdown and a half. But then the rushing too. He was averaging over 25 rushing yards per game over that stretch. And it felt like that was part of his development, was saying like, hey, I need to like take more of what's given. If they're giving me 5-7 yards on the ground, I'm just going to take it if no one's open, rather than, to me, that's just a sign of progression. And like Bryce Young's fast, man. He runs a 4.43, which is like probably, besides like Lamar and Jaden and stuff, like he has to be up there in like top 5 40-yard times for quarterbacks. Like he's not slow. He's very, very fast for a quarterback. So for any player, really, a 4.43 is really fast. So I kind of think that's going to be part of his game a little bit. He had 5 rushing touchdowns as well. So if you combine that with, his passing touchdowns, he had 16 touchdowns over a 7-game stretch. And it's like, that's where you start getting fantasy relevant guys. So I like Bryce Young. And I like the tear down from Purdy to Young. I might even like Bryce Young a little bit more than just Purdy straight up, assuming Purdy's not going to be on the 49ers. If you told me Purdy got a contract from the 49ers, I'd probably roll with Purdy. But if I had to choose right now, and I kind of leaning towards they're not going to give Purdy a huge contract, I might just take Bryce Young and like go with I think he has more upside. That's why he was the number 1 overall pick for a reason, right? So, and there was plays, if you watch like the games, and I know a lot of people weren't watching Carolina games, but if you did like watch the games or you go back and watch them, you see throws from him. You're like, okay, like this is legit. Like, maybe the end numbers don't look as good, but you see throws here and there where it's like, man, this is legit stuff. And get him like a real true number 1 guy and let's see what happens, So I love the tear down to, like you said, he's in that giant bucket. And I think Carolina's offense could be sneaky good next year. Again, I feel like they still need that number one guy. Legette's, I don't think the true alpha, Coker, guys like that. I don't think are the true alphas, but find someone in this draft to kind of be that guy. So it teaches us, like, again, this happened with Herbert and Tua. How far apart with those guys after year one, after year two, and no one even wanted to touch Tua. And obviously, you still want Justin Herbert and stuff, but they're a lot closer than what they were. It seems like the same thing's happening. So just kind of remember that. Like, sometimes guys need time to develop. And Bryce Young had a better year than CJ Stroud from the point he got benched onward, in terms of just pure numbers. So, anything else on those guys or on Bryce Young that you wanted to mention? So overall, like, still buying low on him. He's still ranked, QB 19. He's still like a low end QB2, people valuing him. So is that still kind of a buy low or tear down?
Yeah, probably. Like, it's kind of interesting because there's several guys. Well, there's two specifically with Trevor and Dak, who you kind of mentioned earlier, where it's like, I think I'd rather have those guys, and they're ranked below Bryce, just barely. Like, Lawrence is basically the same price, and then Dak's significantly lower. I mean, he's only 4 spots, but if you kind of believe in like the keep trade cut values in general, like I would rather have those two guys. Trevor, because he's already got the contract, and Dak because he's just, like, we've seen it from him. And I know people are really low on Dak because of this year in general, but it's like, dude was like QB4 in 2022. No, 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it all depends on what you're getting him for. But I kind of like what you said about like the tearing down. Like, if you can go from Purdy down to Bryce and pick up like a significant piece, then I don't mind that at all. But I don't know what you're really going to get there. Like, I don't think you're getting a first on top of Bryce for Purdy. Like, do you think that's realistic? Like, I think it's more like you're getting like an RB2, like maybe like an older player, like a slightly older running back or something like that. Yeah, definitely a starter. Like, just not a high end guy, I would say.
Yeah, unless someone really loves Brock Purdy, which people might not be buying into Bryce Young. But yeah, I mean, I would still like even like a second round pick or a couple of picks, like, because again, I wouldn't be shocked if Bryce Young's just better than Purdy next year. Like, it wouldn't be like, no way, I can't believe that, because all these guys, they're in that bucket of guys. And to me, there's not a huge difference between QB 11 and QB 24 and Dak, like, or 22, whatever he is. So, yeah, I think it's interesting. By the way, since that after their bye week, so it's a small sample size, 7-game stretch, but QB 6 Bryce Young was, and QB 9 in points per game. So he was playing well. But yeah, that is it for our first 2 quarterbacks of the offseason. We'll be, probably going over a lot of these guys, but between now and when the new season rolls around. So make sure to like and subscribe. We are, I think, less than 15 or about 15 away from 1,100. So help us get there. Appreciate everyone. We'll be back talking about some running backs.